Well, it's personal between me and you, and I'm going to do you some serious harm, you big stiff idiot.
The untouchable True School Sports Empire proudly presents something the boxing game's been missing. Hey, what's going on? It's your boy BT, and I came here to talk some boxing with the thousands of True School Sports subscribers. Now, this video right here is more so like a topic that I'm very intrigued in, that I'm very well versed in, and that's the subject of Evander the Real Deal Holyfield. Anybody who knows the history of this channel knows that Evander Holyfield, guys like him and guys like Riddick Bowe were a big part of why this channel has become what it's become and why it's still thriving to this very day. So much love to those guys. I appreciate all the time they gave me in the past, and just I can't say enough good things about Evander Holyfield or Riddick Bowe. But I wanted to talk about just how good was Evander Holyfield in his prime, and when exactly was Evander Holyfield's prime. So I'm gonna tell you guys this: the peak, when a fighter's talent and his skills meet at its highest point with the mental abilities and the maturity, that's called being in your prime. And to me, that night, the night that Evander Holyfield was in his prime, was all the way back on November 13th, 1992, when he lost to Riddick Bowe, but he won the hearts, and his reputation was actually enhanced in a loss. And I'm gonna tell you guys why I think this, because as many of you guys know, I love Riddick Bowe. Riddick Bowe is one of my favorite fighters of all time. And if we're talking about talent, skills, and ability, probably one of the top 5 most naturally talented heavyweights that ever lived. But he just never, he didn't have that discipline to have a longevity in his career. But he was still able to accomplish some great things. So I think when we talk about Riddick Bowe always gets, the thing I always hear about Riddick Bowe is, he didn't have a long title reign. People say all he did was just beat Evander Holyfield. And I'm like, what? You guys are talking about that like that's some sort of small accomplishment. He just beat Evander Holyfield? No. He beat prime, undefeated Evander Holyfield. In fact, the Evander Holyfield that fought Riddick Bowe in the first fight, Riddick Bowe might have been the only guy at that time, at that point in history, in 1992. He was probably the only heavyweight in the world that could have beaten Evander Holyfield. That's how good Evander Holyfield was. So let's talk about Evander before he fought Riddick Bowe on that night. Evander, before he even fought Riddick Bowe, just if you want to go to cruiserweight, right? He fought Dwight Muhammad Qawi, a Hall of Famer, one of the most murderous punchers and most vicious fighters the cruiserweight division has ever known. He might be the most, to this day, I mean, maybe aside from Holyfield himself, he might have been the most vicious cruiserweight the world has ever known. Okay, he beat him on multiple occasions. The second time he knocked him out in '87. He beat top contenders like Ricky Park. He blew him out. I mean, got him out of there in 3 rounds. Beat one of the all-time great cruiserweights in Carlos De Leon. Knocked him out. Made his heavyweight debut against James Quick Tillis. Knocked him out. Knocked out Pinklin Thomas. Knocked out Michael Dokes, who I believe was older, but still had some juice left in the tank. Knocked him out. Knocked out Alex Stewart, who was undefeated, top contender at the time. Knocked him out. He fought Buster Douglas after Buster Douglas had just scored the biggest upset in the history of boxing at that time, maybe ever. Knocked him out in 3 rounds. Now, people want to down the win by saying, well, Buster Douglas was fat and out of shape. Well, that's not Holyfield's fault. He prepared. He did what he needed to do. And whether you like it or not, he was fighting him coming off of the Mike Tyson win. And you can't discredit him for that win in any way, shape, or form. He fought George Foreman in his first real title defense. In his first real title defense, he fought George Foreman. Now, at the time, the win wasn't really appreciated because they said George was old. But you got to remember, George was 69-2, 69 wins with 2 losses going into that fight. On a 5-fight winning streak going into that fight. And this win would later get its appreciation when George, at a more older and advanced age, actually wound up knocking out Michael Moore to become the oldest heavyweight champion boxing's ever known. So that was in my opinion, that win aged amazing, and it's an all-time great win because that was his first. I want you to think about this. We got guys now these days that always want easy defenses and easy titles. Evander defended the belt, first title defense against George Foreman. Then he fought Bert Cooper, who actually, I believe, dropped him and took him to some deep, dark, uncomfortable places. That was a really underrated win. Then he fought Larry Holmes, who at the time was having a bit of a renaissance. You know, Larry Holmes was coming off of beating an undefeated Ray Mercer. You know, he kind of turned back the clock and found the fountain of youth. So, you know, that was a better win than people give it credit for. Then he fought Riddick Bowe. So do you guys hear the depth and quality of that resume before he even got to Riddick Bowe? He went through a lifetime of great fighters and top contenders before he got to Riddick Bowe, right? Then if you take a look at like the 1991 rankings. So these are the rankings going into 92. Holyfield was the top guy, right? Number 2 is Mike Tyson, who at the time, I believe he was going to prison at that time, or he was just getting ready to go to prison around 91. I could be off, correct me if I'm wrong. He was number 2. You had Riddick Bowe, who was 3. You had Razor Ruddock, who was a really good fighter in the day. Probably could be a champion today. Ray Mercer was 5. George Foreman was 6. Tim Witherspoon was 7. Tony Tucker was 8. Lennox Lewis was number 9. And you got to remember what Lennox, right? A lot of people will probably say, well, Lennox Lewis could be Evander Holyfield, whatever, right? But you got to remember, the Lennox Lewis, as we know him, you know, the guy that trained with Emmanuel Stewart and beat every man he ever stepped in the ring with, the guy that he was in 1991 is different than the guy that he ultimately became. You got to remember at that time, around that time, you know, 91, or even going into like 93, when he fought like Frank Bruno in 93, he still wasn't the guy that we know him as. He was still a guy that was very much in development. You could see that he had the talent to be great, but he just hadn't had it put all the way put together yet. So for me personally, I don't think Lennox would have beat Holyfield in 91. I don't think so. He was still too wet behind the ears and just had a lot of technical deficiencies. So I think Evander would have beat him. And then if you go down a little bit more, you got a 10 with Michael Moore. So a very, very solid top 10, a very, very great era for the heavyweight division. But, you know, Riddick Bowe got taken to some deep, dark, uncomfortable places in that fight. And in that fight, to me, he answered a lot of questions, but the guy that was forced to make him have to answer those questions was Evander Holyfield. I don't think anybody in that top 10, apart from maybe George Foreman, would have had anything for Riddick Bowe at that time. Because Riddick Bowe at that time, going into 92, there was a lot of questions about his dedication, which would ultimately be answered throughout the course of his career. He wasn't the most disciplined guy, and that's why he wasn't a greater heavyweight than he was. But a lot of people questioned his heart, his determination, his mental fortitude. And the only reason I think he was able to answer them and why he even prepared in such a way was because he knew he had a great fighter on the opposite end of that ring. I've interviewed Riddick Bowe and Evander Holyfield many times, and an interview I did with them where they were talking about, I interviewed them one time about how, about fighters having sex before fights, right? And Evander Holyfield said that he had sex before all of his fights, pretty much. And Riddick Bowe said in his career, he had sex before all of his fights, apart from the first Evander Holyfield fight. And no coincidence that actually wound up being the performance of his career. But I don't even think Riddick Bowe would have gone to those lengths to be that disciplined if he didn't have a guy like Evander Holyfield in the ring. You know, we know the infamous round 10 where Riddick Bowe and Holyfield are on the clinch, and Riddick Bowe freaking just rips an uppercut that staggers Holyfield. And he goes on the attack and tries to go for the gusto and get him out of there. And, you know, he doesn't even drop him in that round. The round actually goes the full distance with no knockdowns. But not only that, Holyfield in the latter part of the round comes back with ridiculous combinations and really lands punches that hurt Riddick Bowe and buzz him and get his attention. So to say that Riddick Bowe just beat Evander Holyfield, like you want to just brush that to the side and say it's not a big deal. It's a very big deal, because he beat a guy that at the time was undefeated. And you heard all the fighters I named, that Holyfield fought before he even got to Riddick Bowe. I mean, you had at least, at the bare minimum, you had at least like two, maybe 3 Hall of Famers that he fought before he fought Riddick Bowe. So this wasn't no like regular champion. This guy was seasoned. This guy was battle tested. This guy was tried and true. And for Riddick Bowe to get over the hump against a guy like that, it cemented his place in history. Yeah, he didn't have the great resume that probably we thought he should have had, because we know how talented Riddick Bowe was. We know how great of an inside fighter he was. We know that he had a world-class jab. We know he had a granite chin. We know he had a very good, or maybe even a great straight right hand. He was damn near an A+ everywhere around the board, an A or A+ everywhere around the board as a heavyweight. The only thing he was lacking was the discipline. But on that night, in my humble opinion, I don't think anybody in the top 10 of the Ring Magazine heavyweight rankings would have beat that Holyfield that fought Bowe. Not Tyson, not Razor Ruddock, not Ray Mercer. Holyfield had already beaten George Foreman. Not Tim Witherspoon, not Tony Tucker, not Lennox Lewis, not Michael Moore. I think he beats all the rest of the other 9 guys, and probably half of those 9 guys he beats pretty soundly. So yeah, I just want to make this video to say that because that was something that's on my mind, because I think people can sometimes look at Riddick Bowe's resume, and yes, it doesn't have the depth and quality of like a Lennox Lewis or like a Vladimir Klitschko, or even like a Joe Louis, or not even a Marciano, you know. But that Holyfield was that good. Holyfield was that good to where he really brought out the best in Bowe. And Riddick Bowe said to me, he's even said to me the first time I ever interviewed him in 2015, he said, people wouldn't know who I am if it wasn't for Holyfield. People wouldn't know how great I truly was if it wasn't for Holyfield. So just on that statement alone, we know that Evander Holyfield wasn't just no rinky-dink, run-of-the-mill champion. This guy was an all-time great, and I don't think anybody in Ring Magazine on that night, except Riddick Bowe, would have beat that version of Holyfield. But that's my opinion. You know, you guys let me know what you think in the comments down below. I just had that on my mind. I'm going to start doing more of these videos where like I just start giving my thoughts on older historical fights and just things like that. I kind of like these videos. But yeah, you guys let me know what you think in the comments down below. Make sure you guys take the time to subscribe. And like I say in every single one of these videos, you can love me or you can hate me, but I'm just a kid from Daniel. So until next time, take your ass.
Thank you for watching another video on True School Sports, the home of boxing. If you made it this far, do me a favor and do yourself a damn favor. Hit that subscribe button and surely you will not be disappointed. You know, True School Sports bringing you the latest and greatest, the untouchable, you know, boxing content, interviews, news videos, breakdowns, live fight reaction extravaganza. We've got a great community of people here, boxing fans all over the world, from America to the UK to Australia, and on and on and on. So join the empire today. Hit that subscribe button. Take care and God.